Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Language Facilitation Q&A. My name is Marcy Melzer, and I am an intuitive language facilitation consultant and speech and language pathologist too. I went to school and studied speech and language pathology. I got my master's degree, and I worked for 30 years as a speech and language pathologist, licensed and certified and doing all that stuff. And then I realized that I was spinning my wheels doing therapy, because when I figured out how to coach parents, I realized that parents are far better at facilitating natural spoken language than even speech therapists. And so I've shifted my work into doing language facilitation, coaching, and consulting. So while I am a trained speech and language pathologist, I have given up working within the speech language therapy world, because I know that parents are better at facilitating natural language, and I am dedicated to providing the resources for you as parents to be able to do this yourselves faster than speech therapy. And so what I am going to do today is I have some questions prepared that I've been receiving from folks all week. And if you have questions today, you are welcome to post them in the comment section of this video, and I'll get to them as I scroll through. Now, welcome again to everybody. I'm so happy you're here. And if you're watching on the replay, welcome. You can post questions in the comments too, because I'm going to be following the comments after the video airs and be able to collect those questions to respond for next week. So I'm pleased to be able to provide this information to you, for you, so that you can get going with your language facilitation journey with your late talk child. And by the way, late talking just means not talking yet. Parents who have kids who are diagnosed with just about every single kind of thing that can cause kids to be speech and language delayed are helping their kids learn to use natural spoken language with language facilitation themselves. And so what I'm going to do is I'm digging in today to talk about some questions that I received. And the first question that was a biggie this week that I received from many speech therapists, actually, who started following my page, and they had questions about my stance on using augmentative or alternative communication and how it potentially blocks natural spoken language. And there was a lot of feedback from speech therapists quoting an article from the American Speech and Hearing Association, which has a definite stance on augmentative and alternative communication. And in that article, it is clearly written, in fact, I've printed it out so that I can quote it for you, some AAC myths and realities. So one of the things that I get a question very commonly from parents who follow my page is that they are wanting for their kids to be using spoken language. However, their therapists, either in speech therapy or in ABA, are encouraging them to begin using a device, a tablet device that has pictures on it to use for communicating. And the theory is that use of this device will help children learn to use natural spoken language eventually. And the American Speech and Hearing Association says that there are many common myths that can potentially affect an individual's or family member's willingness and motivation to use AAC. So the first thing is, I'm wondering, why does the American Speech and Hearing Association identify that families and individuals' motivation to use AAC devices is challenged? You know, why would their willingness to use this device be, why would they not want to use those devices? And so something must have been going on in the world where people were somehow resistant to using these devices. And so the American Speech and Hearing Association had to write a stance paper to support support it. And so this myth number one is really the only myth I'm going to address because it's the only one that affects what I talk about. And that says introducing AAC will reduce an individual's motivation to improve natural speech and will hinder language development, including the development of social communication skills. And AAC should be introduced only after the ability to use natural speech has been completely ruled out. So there's actually two statements in that myth. And the first statement is that introducing AAC will reduce an individual's motivation to improve natural speech and will hinder language development, including the development of social communication skills. And that thing that has been identified as a myth has been debunked here by these research findings that are quoted here. And these research, they come from the authors of the research are Miller, Light, and Schlosser, and they are from the year 2006. And then the other one is Rosen and Miller from 1991. And then, so that article, that research indicates that the use of AAC does not affect motivation to use natural speech and can, in fact, help improve natural speech. Here's the caveat: when therapy focuses simultaneously on natural speech development and use of AAC in a multimodal approach. That's what it says here, multimodal approach. And those authors that I just quoted from 2006 and 1991, that's what they're saying about using of AAC. Now, here's what I am going to say to challenge this research in the year 2019, going into 2020. First of all, the use of technology in general in our lives is taking away from social communication, period, end of, in everybody who uses it, myself included. We don't talk on the phone anymore because we can text. We use social media to respond and investigate things instead of going to the office. In fact, online, because I have an online practice, my clients are able to access my information via use of technology. Technology is everywhere. It's presented to children even as young as tiny babies, and they are learning to be able to use it very easily. And back in 2006, we didn't even have smartphones, let alone common everyday technology to distract us away from being social. So I posit that back in 2006, there were many other motivators used by clinicians, therapists, outside of technology. We used wooden toys. We used, get out and play and whole body activities. And now, if a therapist isn't able to keep a child engaged with them, doing any of those other kinds of plays, the go-to thing is what the child likes, and what the child likes is devices. So I'm here to say that in the families who report to me, and in fact, even the families that I have met personally since 2000, certainly since 2006, these families have technology everywhere in their homes. And it is the technology that is taking their child's information and interest away from them using spoken language with other people. And I know that this is happening everywhere because I have seen it. And the parents who are communicating with me, who call me, who talk to me in my Waves of Communication program, and who have started working with me, even as paid clients, have come to me saying that their therapists have stopped working on spoken language. Goals in their IEPs are not for use of spoken language. They are use of devices or pictures to communicate. In fact, the goals in the IEPs are written as I read them. Child will indicate wants and needs via use of one of these things. And they talk about speech or indicating a picture or using a sign or pointing or whatever it is that they can measure, because goals in therapy must be measurable. And people who work on spoken language in structured therapy, this is the way I was trained, this is the way that speech therapists do it, they facilitate children to imitate and say as many words as possible in a speech therapy session. That's how they count their progress. I was able to get the child to say X amount of words with X kind of model or reinforcement or prompt or whatever, X amount of times. That's how they're able to gauge their progress. Otherwise, how can they measure progress for insurance companies, documentation? And they do standardized tests where kids have to do certain skills, score certain things to be able to show progress. So it is challenging for a late talking child who is resistant to being social, resistant to looking at anyone, resistant to engaging at all, because they are hooked on technology or they are exposed to a lot of technology outside of the therapy session. As soon as they are presented with technology as an alternative to try using the spoken language that they don't like, they are going to grab it and use it and run with it. And they're going to use it a lot. And the speech therapists who are gauging progress are going to see how much easier it is for these kids to use the technology than use the spoken language. And then they focus all their effort on programming this complex device. Because back in 2006, the devices that were presented to children were much more simple, much more basic, and much more complicated to figure out and solve and program. We had to cut pictures and put them into plastic devices that you touched on. And now things are all happening on an iPad. And the therapist used to have to spend so much time programming and figuring out these devices that they also had to spend lots of time working with kids. If they were in a therapy session, there was very limited stuff they could request on the thing. So they had to work on more play-based and interactive things to try to get the kids to say words. Nowadays, the goals are replacing. And this is how you know if it's blocking in your child's case. Look at the therapy goals that are presented to you in your child's plan. If the goals are for producing spoken language naturally in response to play-based activities, then there is natural language facilitation going on. But if the goals are for your child to say words or label things with pictures or request things, use these communication systems to request the things that they want, then those kids will find themselves using the device for only that, for requesting. And then when the device is not available, their way to communicate is not available because maybe they want to have something that's not listed on the iPad, or maybe the iPad is broken, or maybe it's got left at school, or maybe the parent just doesn't want to use it, or perhaps the child is even in the bathtub and they are trying to communicate that they want you to get the soap out of their eyes with their tablet. If that's all they have to communicate and you've not done any language facilitation in other times, then the child is going to go back to using behavior. In the absence of the iPad, they're going to request things with behavior, drag you around, point you, take you to things, and then they've already communicated their idea non-verbally. If you present a tablet and say, I know you want the cookies, push the cookies button. That looks like an extra effort to a child and they're not going to want to do it. pretty soon they're going to avoid using the tablet. And the more harder you push, the harder they'll avoid it. And then you end up with a child who has anxiety, because not only does the tablet only allow them to communicate what they want, their requests, what about when they're feeling a certain way? If they're upset, if they don't want to do what you're asking them to do, and they don't have a way to say on the iPad, no, 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 or whatever it is that they're trying to do, they're going to use their body language. They're going to use the rest of themselves to communicate. Now, this myth is debunked when augmentative communication systems are used simultaneously in the same activity, not in the same session. Like first we do iPad time, then we do speech time simultaneously. If your child is listening to a device, what they call here SGD, speech generated device, if they are encouraged to listen to that device and somehow they think listening to the device is going to help them learn more natural language, you are incorrect. And the next research that it says here is that intervention for minimally verbal, which means that kids do have words. They are saying words for something. Maybe they're saying cookie to request cookie. Maybe they're saying no. Maybe they're doing they've used some words. So intervention, this is what the research says, and this is what is from 2014. It's the newest one. Intervention for minimally verbal school-age children with ASD that included use of a SGD, speech-generated device. ASD is autism spectrum disorder. That included use of an SGD, which is speech-generated device, increased spontaneous output and use of novel utterances with the same interventions that did not include use of a speech-generated device. So what they're doing is they're saying, here's the child who is using the speech-generated device, and when they say novel utterances, they're saying the child is saying those things themselves unprompted. So when a child is at a school or a therapy learning to use I want cookie when they are with the device and the device is saying I want cookie, when they don't have the device, the same kids were saying novel utterances like want cookie or cookie without the device there. So that's the theory, that the device is teaching the child because the child is listening to the speech generated device say, I want cookie. And they heard that a lot of times. Later, when they were home with their moms, they were saying, I want cookie. And then the family, usually what happens is they either abandon the device and get their kids to say, I want everything, or the device becomes more complicated. You have to program different levels and they learn to say, I want all of these things. So this is usually when it breaks down. Now, this therapist, Kasari et al. In 2014, they are saying that novel speech produced on their own is progress from the child using a device to say, I want cookie, to themselves saying, I want cookie. And I believe that that's not the same progress that parents are looking for, because what I believe the speech that children are learning from listening to speech generated devices is only request based speech. If they are using this device and then later saying the same things that the device is saying, or novel, meaning they're changing them a little bit, but they're still using them for requesting, that is natural language because the child is using it for requesting. However, it is not the same as conversational language, and they only know how to use those canned phrases. Canned meaning it came out of the SG device. They learned how to manipulate and use those vocabulary into their own phrases, and it looks like a whole bunch of needs based language, labeling things. So they learn the carrier phrase, I want, or it's a, or give me, or no, or yes. And then they combine that carrier phrase with the noun vocabulary. I want cookie, no bathroom. that kind of stuff. So it comes into this novel stuff, and then those are the things that the child starts to say. However, the one thing that these AAC devices do not teach, and that only parents can teach, is the social interaction of listening to humans talk. This data, this research is giving the device combined with a therapist talking and explaining what the device is saying is somehow applied to their everyday life. Once again, in order for this research to work, the therapist must be using the device and combining it with functional language facilitation in the same activity, not in the same session, in the same activity. And if your therapist is not using the AA system combined with natural language facilitation, that is listening to humans, not just the sound generated device, but humans saying those things functionally themselves, demonstrating the activity, your child is only memorizing things that they have heard. It's just like they learn the phrases and sentences that they get from the videos they watch, the characters they listen to on TV, and even from you if you use the same kind of prompting all the time. For example, if you say to your child, "Do you want this?" and your child starts to use "Do you want?" to ask you for things instead of "Do I want something?" If your child is giving you back the feedback, the similar sounds that you are just hearing randomly from yourself or from other things, that means that they are memorizing spoken language to get their needs met. It is not conversational. They're communicating their feelings very likely with other things, other reasons, other body language, all of that stuff. This augmentative communication is, I believe, and call me old school, I learned how to be a speech therapist in 1990, and I've worked for 30 years helping families facilitate natural spoken language. And never have I ever, and I have used a lot of these devices, never have I ever seen a child want to give it up and look at me. When it was available, the child always looked at that device, always 100% of the time. In fact, I stopped using computers and devices a long time ago in therapy, only at the very end, if I needed to talk to a mom or something like that, because it's not helping kids learn. It's only helping them memorize. And memorized speech is not the same as natural spoken language. Okay, so I know that was kind of a convoluted way to go about saying all this, but it is a very important thing because I know this technology is so readily available. Remember, this research, 1985, 1995, 1997, the newest thing is 2010, 2014. When this research was created, smartphones weren't even a thing. And now they are everywhere. They are so available, and kids are so attracted to them that they are definitely stopping social language. And if you haven't seen this in your child, I welcome you to write a comment. But if you have seen it, I welcome you to write a comment as well, because it truly is something that is important for parents to realize. If a therapist is pressuring you to try to use one of these devices and you want spoken language from your child, I recommend that you ask the therapist, what are they doing now to facilitate spoken language? Because if they are not doing something right now to facilitate spoken language and they want to add this on, then they themselves are going against this research. Remember, the research only works if the AAC device is used in combination with, it says right here, when therapy focuses simultaneously on natural speech production, right? It's the only way. Kids learn social language from, social means people, not social media, right? Kids don't learn to social media spoken language. Kids learn spoken language socially by communicating with other humans, primarily their parents, and that's where it comes from. All right, so I know I've been talking a lot about that, but it was a big deal. And I do have some questions from some folks that I got over on Facebook and on YouTube, so I'm going to go ahead and dig into these questions now. And the first one is from Preeti, and Preeti has a 6-year-old, and she joined me over on Facebook, and she has a question about school. She has a 6-year-old, and she said he's still learning how to be verbal. She didn't tell me where he was in the stage, but school is starting to be a concern, and she's wondering if she should have her child in a regular school or a special school. And Preeti, I don't know where you live, but here's the thing. Natural language comes with natural experiences. So the more restrictive, and this is common in the United States too, it should be the rule for everyone. The least restrictive educational environment should always be maintained for every child. So that all of that depends on your child. And instead of the school trying to make your child fit the school, you may need to find a school that will accommodate your child. Because in the United States, in special education for children, the MO, the way to go, is that parents get a specialized education plan, an individual education plan, where the school will provide accommodations for the child so that the child can learn as close as they can to their peers in their class. And so that means that in a regular education class, a child must be able to sit in a group, learn from one teacher with a number of children. And the more restrictive that gets, the less like regular education it is. And so that's why they call it special education. Now, in your case, you need to figure out if school is a problem, you have to figure out what is the problem about this school. Ideally, you'll want to try to work with this school where your child is now to help them provide the accommodations. But before they can provide the accommodations, they need to know where his areas of need are. And if your child is in a school, you should have all of that documented in your plan and your evaluation. If you do not understand that plan or see exactly how the teachers and aides, given all the goals on their plan, how those things are helping your child. If you don't see how it's happening or why or understand what it is, then it's time for you to have a meeting with your child's school to find out. You need to find out exactly what his challenges are and what he's not doing that the other kids are doing. But you also need to find out and remember in your own case, because you may see skills that they don't see at school. So if your child is reading or spelling or counting or doing any of those things at home, and at school he is refusing to do those things, then my first recommendation is that you get some video. Take some video of your child doing those things with you and notice in the video how comfortable he is. If he is willing to do these things for you and not at school, you have to find out what is different about the school that he is not comfortable enough demonstrating the skills that he already has. So that's one of the things. And then you also have to understand how much time is your child actually participating with the other kids in his class. Because if the teacher is having to do a lot of extra things just for him and he can't participate with everybody else, then your child's not in the right environment. And it's not only your child who's struggling, but also the teacher. Because teachers, again, their job is to get a whole group of kids to be doing the same thing at the same time. And if your child is consistently more than 50% resisting what's going on in the classroom, you need to find out either how to get an aide to help your child participate better in the classroom or find a different educational environment. Those are the two things that are the most important. How much is your child enjoying and participating and engaging with things? And how much of the stuff that other kids are doing is your child behind in? Because if there's a significant gap between your child and their peers, then the room needs to have some more accommodation, or your child needs a new room. And so that's my suggestion for you about schooling with a late talking child. Remembering also that late talking kids don't have a way to tell you what's going on at school, especially after they get to be 6. All kinds of stuff come into play. They're too smart. They figure things out. They solve problems. They get into trouble even. And if your teacher is having trouble, your child's teacher is having trouble understanding him, then you need to have some very, very clear communication with your child's teacher about what is going on over there. And use whatever communication the teacher likes. I've done videos about this before, talking to them about if it's emails every day, if it's a communication notebook. Just make sure you're not giving the teacher more work, because the teacher may need you as a mom to go above their head, especially in the United States, and talk to the special ed director of their school, the coordinator, or the principal of the school, because it's already pretty late in the year right now, the school year, for kids to be still floundering. By this time, your child's either succeeding in their classroom and making little gains every day, or things have broken down and it's starting to go downhill fast. If that's what's going on in your child's life and school is breaking down, now is the time to have that meeting. Do not wait until January. Make sure that you get things squared away so that when you have a break at home, you're doing some language facilitation. And then when you go back in January, you have a new plan so that your child can start to be successful. You want that plan to be ready, good to go, because over the break from school, they're going to get out of the habits of doing all that school stuff too. So there's lots and lots of things to consider. This is a very common question that I get from parents who are in my Lifetime Waves of Communication program, because they get their kids talking, minimally verbal, school starts to break down, or the teachers aren't responding to the kids' communication in the way that they need to. And so that's it. Schools are breaking down and parents are looking for alternatives, and they're trying to find ways to work with their teachers. And it's never a good idea if you have to make big changes to a school. I always recommend, if there are many, many things wrong in a whole process, then it's time to look at a new school, because you'll never fix all those things. You'll get one or the other, or there'll be negotiations. So they'll work on behavior, or they'll work on speech. They'll work on attendance versus health versus, they pick and choose the things that they can focus on, even though you get lots of goals. And, again, you don't want to waste your child's education time being in an environment where they're not good. So that's that for Preeti. All right. The next question I got is from Frida, which is a great question. And Frida has been using the Sunrise approach. Now, Sunrise is a wonderful program, and I love it. And her comment was that what I'm talking about sounds very similar to the Sunrise approach. And she wants to know what's different versus Sunrise and what I do. And I'm going to tell you that they're very, very similar. My approach, Sunrise, comes from a behavior standpoint. And they do say that all behavior is communication, and they are 100% correct. Sunrise also helps parents become intuitive. Look at the situation from their child's perspective. See how their children are feeling and provide them with ways to overcome those feelings, feel better about themselves, so that their anxiety reduces. And when anxiety reduces, you have what they call green light days or green light times. And then your child is a ready learner. But if they're in a red light time, when they're anxious, avoiding, using lots of behaviors to communicate when they're not being understood, those are red light times. And the Sunrise program, I agree completely, says kids can't even learn when they're in that mindset. So Sunrise is all about mindset. And I do talk a lot about mindset in my Waves of Communication program. In fact, it is the number one thing that you have to get straight in order to become a good language facilitator. You have to be able to see the situation from your child's perspective. And then what's different about what I do is that I provide you with the language models that you need. How do we talk with our child, not just to get them to listen to you and follow follow your directions, but how to get them to actually learn the spoken language. How are we talking more from a linguistic perspective than from a behavior perspective? While those behavior things are necessary, my Waves of Communication program takes parents to the next level, where you are not only engaging your child in fabulous joint attention, where they're learning, they're doing the things that they want to do. I encourage parents to give their kids responsibility and become part of the household so that they are social members of the household. And doing that is also very necessary for learning language. You need to become a good listener, not just hear what people are saying, but a good listener to learn natural spoken conversational language. If you're not a good listener, the only language you're going to come up with is my needs, my stuff, I need to get myself taken care of. And that's always while kids start with that needs-based, me-based language. When they move into social language and sharing experiences with other people, that's where the language facilitation will take you to the next level. So Sunrise and language facilitation and my Waves of Communication programs go hand in hand. In fact, my most successful parents are Sunrise moms. So that's the similarities between Sunrise and language facilitation with Waves of Communication. All right. So Divya is the last question I have. And by the way, if you're watching me live, go ahead and put your question in the comments. Now, I haven't seen any pop in, but I know I've seen some people popping in watching about this AAC stuff and answering questions. And this last one is another very common question, although Divya has kind of got a double whammy. Her little guy, girl, I don't know if it's a boy or girl, her child has bilateral cochlear implants, which means something's going on with that child's hearing where he didn't hear well from the beginning, something structurally wrong. So these cochlear implants, now the technology is amazing and kids are hearing wonderful spoken language. So the reason that child is late talking is because of the hearing issue. However, now that a child can hear, you can now that you're now that you have sorry, I just got a really distracting question that was inappropriate. That's, I guess, what happens on YouTube, and it distracted me. So anyway, Divya's other situation is that her little guy is definitely listening to people talking now that he can hear with his cochlear implants, but her concern is that they're teaching two languages. Divya is in India, and in India it is very common for kids to learn 2 or 3 languages because even in their household, they might have multiple people visiting or even family members who come from different places that speak different countries. So I do have a couple of tips about bilingual language facilitation. The first tip is kids can learn multiple languages at the same time. However, it is best if they get confident in using at least that needs-based language I talked about with one language first. And that could be like the mom's language, the mother tongue, whatever you speak to your child when they were first a baby. If that's a language that you use in your household commonly in your community, then you want to facilitate that language first and get your child to the point where they are communicating things. Now, it doesn't take very long for your child to be able to start to say words for the things they want with language facilitation. Many parents who have followed my strategies see improvement already in the first couple weeks, but that needs-based language, once you learn it in one language, it's okay to be able to shift because once you learn how to learn a spoken language, then your brain already knows like those superhighways of language learning are developed already. So being exposed to a second language is okay at that point. If your child is late talking and they're not confident with one language yet, if you try to talk to them at different times with different languages, or they hear 2 different people speaking different languages, it could potentially delay their improvement because they're just trying to learn. And And the best way to do that, even if people do speak multiple languages in your house, is that everybody, when you're in front of the child, should be speaking the same language. They don't have to speak the same language all day. Like they could be speaking English for one conversation and Hindi for another conversation. And that is okay. The whole conversation, though, and everybody in it should be using one language at a time. Because for late talkers, learning language comes from listening to other people in their environment talk to them, talk about them, talk around them, and talk to each other. And all kids need to hear how language sounds. So, and that's how they learn pronouns. That's how they learn people's names. That's how they learn to communicate their feelings. If they see you being angry, talking about your feelings, stop doing that. I don't want to see that. They learn how to communicate their feelings with words by watching and listening to you. So when you are using multiple languages, it is possible with late talkers to do that. But with your son who's really working on listening now with his cochlear implants, you want to speak only one language at a time. And try to limit the different languages until your child is spontaneously producing some verbal speech. So if he is talking a little bit, then it's okay to continue to start to use two languages. But if your child is still very nonverbal and using their body to communicate and not their mouth, then you want to focus on one language first. And everything your child does, looks at, touches, gets into, shows you, you provide language for all those things. And that's how it works out to be language facilitation. And that's why spoken language comes after you do those kinds of things. All right. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and thank everybody for joining me today. I'm going to talk really quick about my book. It's called If It Isn't Fun, It Isn't Fun. Teach Your Child to Talk Faster Than Speech Therapy. It is on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, and the audiobook is coming out this month. The audio files are being processed as we speak, so hopefully later this month the Audible will be out. This book has the whole process to identify what is blocking your child's speech, whether it's a physical blockage, an emotional blockage, an environmental blockage. There's many things that block a child's natural spoken language, and unless you figure out what's blocking your child's spoken language, they won't learn to use natural talking and conversation. And I know that that's what most parents want from their kids, because that's what makes them successful. When kids learn how to use speech to communicate not just their needs, but their ideas and their wisdom, that's when they become effective members of your household and members of their school and their class and members of their community. And that's how they share their wisdom with the world. And you as parents are the ones. It's easy for parents to facilitate listening and concentrating on parents and spoken language. And use of augmentative and alternative systems or tablets or phones or all of those other things alternative to speech are potentially wasting your time and blocking your progress unless your child physically can't make sounds at all with their mouth, or your child can't hear at all. There aren't very many criteria for spoken language. You just need to be able to hear speech, see people's faces, and want to talk. And that's all it takes, really, with the right kind of language facilitation. And if you want to learn more about becoming a language facilitator, you are welcome to visit my website, wavesofcommunication.com. I have a free class for parents over there, a 45-minute class. There are more than 200 videos here on my YouTube channel you can scroll through and find. In fact, there is a playlist that is called Get Started with Language Facilitation here. You can go to that playlist and watch a series of videos. It's like a mini course right there. I also have a full independent study course, full-blown 8 modules to teach you everything from reach and teach your kid all the way up to conversational speech, and bilingual stuff is in there. It also links you to YouTube videos. So it's kind of like a double way. You can use all these resources with the videos in the course. And if you buy my independent study course right now, you get a free copy of my book. I'll send it to you in the mail. myself. I got them here. I'll send them to you. So if you are interested in learning how to do that, you can have access to all those courses. And I also work with folks one-on-one in my face-to-face and group coaching programs. So you can find out all the information about how to work with me on my website, wavesofcommunication.com. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody, today again. And I will see you all Thursdays at 2 p.m. on YouTube on Waves of Communication, and every Monday. Now that I've hit 1,000 subscribers, thank you so much for everybody who's subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe now and hit that little wiggly bell, because then you're going to know every time I post a live video. And you'll also know because it's going to be noon Eastern time on Mondays, every Monday, unless, YouTube shuts me down or something. I'm going to be here doing more language facilitation Q&A. And if you have a question for next week, now's the time on the replay to go ahead and post it in the comments so that I can catch it next time. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I will see you all on my next live video. Bye for now.